Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The British Parliament has been officially dissolved ahead of a general election on 12th of December. The dissolution ended the shortest parliamentary session in just over 70 years. The House of Commons met for only 19 days since the state opening on 14th of October. For the next 25 days, there will be no legislative activity in the UK, and the government will act under a special code of conduct. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Boris Johnson met Queen Elizabeth at the Buckingham Palace to mark the formal start of the December 12 election campaign. The United States is training Gulf allies to protect naval routes in the region's troubled waterways. The Pentagon says the naval exercises are aimed at preparing for any Iranian aggression in international waters. For more, watch this report.
The exercise is being held in the strategic waterway separating Iran from the pro-US Arab Gulf monarchies. The 3-week international maritime exercise, the second largest of its kind, began on October 21st.
One of the biggest reasons for us being out here is to build international relations. So really it's relationships, right? Me being able to talk to the other team leads, build relationships. So if a mining event does happen, that us as an international team can intercede and work as a team to remove mines.
The IMX was launched after a number of commercial vessels were attacked in the Gulf from May, ratcheting up tensions.
We are here with the forces taking part in the IMX to increase our capabilities and share expertise with other forces in fighting mines in order to maintain the security and safety of international navigation.
The IMX maneuvers engage over 5,000 personnel, 40 vessels, and 17 aircraft from 50 countries.
In the US, President Donald Trump and his Republican allies suffered defeats as Democrats were poised to win elections in 2 states. Democrat Andy Beshear claimed an upset win in Kentucky over the Republican governor backed by President Trump. But the Republican candidate, Matt Bevin, said he will not concede defeat, citing unspecified irregularities. Democrats also seized full control of the legislature in Virginia for the first time in 20 years. Republicans held on to power in the Mississippi governor vote following a tight race in the traditional Republican stronghold. Political pundits say the results are a gauge of the political mood ahead of next year's presidential election. For more on this, we are joined by our correspondent Harry Horton from Washington, D.C. Horton, in a major blow to President Donald Trump, U.S. Democrats have made significant gains in state elections. Can we see the results as the preamble to the 2020 presidential elections?
Well, certainly I think Democrats waking up this morning will be in a far happier mood than their Republican rivals. These results are very good results for the Democrats, in particular in the state of Kentucky, where the victory in the governor's election there, that's a big boost to Democrats. However, I think we've got to talk about the fact that US President Donald Trump wasn't on the ballot in these local elections. It was local candidates. They were talking about local issues. So in the presidential election, which is more than a year away, we could be facing a very different picture. Of course, voters' attitudes may change in that time, and voters' attitudes towards President Donald Trump might be different to their attitudes towards their local Republican candidate. But look, worrying signs for Republicans here in the fact that they suffered big defeats in the state of Virginia, a big loss in the state of Kentucky. And in particular, when you look at these election results as a whole, Republicans really struggled to get support in suburban areas. And that's an area that Republicans have struggled with a lot in previous local elections. That's a big concern for them ahead of the 2020 presidential election. So the picture here this morning in Washington is that Democrats are feeling a little bit more confident about their chances in next year's 2020 election. And Republicans, whilst they're not panicking at the moment, they might be slightly concerned about the work that they've got to do over the next year to ensure that President Trump is re-elected.
So, Harry, when we about the impeachment inquiry against President Donald Trump, has that anything to do with the changing of the voters' mindsets as the Democrats seized full control in the state of Virginia for the first time in 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. I think it probably had some impact on voters in these local elections, although it's worth saying that in the state of Kentucky in particular, which is a big Republican state, voted overwhelmingly for President Trump in the last election. The Democratic candidate there, who was successful, of course, in that election, the Democratic candidate didn't talk much about impeachment, tried to differentiate himself from national Democrats, and took a very moderate stance when talking towards the electorate there. So, look, there's some evidence to suggest that by steering away from impeachment, Democrats can be more successful in these more Republican-leaning states. But we have seen over the past few weeks steady support among the general public in the United States. If you look at the opinion polls, steady support for this impeachment inquiry that Democrats are carrying out. However, on the other side, we've also seen staunch support from Republican lawmakers towards President Trump. No evidence that any of those Republicans in Congress are about to break away from President Trump on this impeachment issue. And I think in large part that will be because those Republican lawmakers are confident that the voters, the Republican voters that elected them to office, also hold the same views. So there's still a long way to go, lots more damaging evidence emerging in this inquiry day by day. And of course, those things could shift in future.
There had already been a lot of hue and cry going on after the previous presidential elections of foreign meddling into those elections. Yesterday, U.S. security officials warned that foreign adversaries would attempt to interfere in the 2020 elections as well. So what sort of measures do you think are they taking to counter this sort of an issue?
Yeah, look, there's two issues here. The first one is interference in election infrastructure and trying to rig the vote, I suppose. So that's about election security, ensuring that all those ballot papers and election databases and machines, they can't be compromised in any way to affect the actual material vote. The other issue is about election interference in social media and in trying to change people's views towards the election through propaganda and other efforts. Now, on the first thing, on election security, I think the US security agencies are trying to work closely with local agencies and local groups to ensure that those election databases are as secure as they possibly can be, and they're working through different scenarios. So if they're hacked, if X happens or Y happens, here's how we're going to respond to ensure that the election is still safe and secure. On the question of those election interference efforts through propaganda and through social media campaigns, that's a lot harder to police. So what we've seen US security agencies say is that they're trying to educate the public about getting information from verified sources, how to ensure that those sources aren't foreign governments or foreign interference efforts, and trying to get people to report those interference efforts as and when they see it to their local officials. But that's a really hard thing to do, and I think it's fair to say that US security agencies haven't quite figured out exactly how they can do that properly just yet.
Harry Horton, our opponent, updating us regarding the victories which have been taken by the Democrats against Republicans, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for your time. Moving on, the EU has welcomed the peace deal between the Yemeni government and the southern separatists. Yesterday, Yemen's government and southern separatists signed a power-sharing pact to end their long-running conflict. The deal was brokered by Saudi Arabia. In a statement, Brussels said the agreement is an important step towards de-escalation and a peace for Yemen and the region. Earlier, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said the agreement is a step towards a political solution to end the war in Yemen. UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, has welcomed the move. In a tweet, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the agreement is an important step towards peace and stability in Yemen. Islamabad and Beijing have agreed to expand the scope of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. CPEC is a flagship project of Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. The decision was taken during the 9th Joint Cooperation Committee meeting of the CPEC in Islamabad. Pakistan's Minister of Planning, Khusru Bakhtiar, said several project milestones have been achieved this year. He said several others will be completed by the end of the year. China's deputy head of National Reform Commission, Ning Jizai, said both sides have agreed to cooperate in all domains. Led by Jizai, the Chinese delegation also met Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan. PM Khan said Jizai's visit was of great significance and will help fast-track CPEC's second phase. He also invited the delegation to explore opportunities in Pakistan's metal mining and agriculture sectors. A group of 2,500 Indian Sikh pilgrims have arrived in Pakistan to attend the opening of the Kartarpur corridor. The pilgrims will also take part in the 550th birth anniversary ceremonies of Sikhism founder Baba Guru Nanak Dev. Pakistan's chairman, Evacuee Trust Property Board, Amir Ahmed, welcomed the group at the Wagah border. Pilgrims praised Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, saying he has achieved what could not be done in the last 72 years. PM Khan will inaugurate the Kartarpur corridor on 9th of November, days before Baba Guru Nanak's birth anniversary celebrations. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says protection of the country's environment is his government's top priority. He was speaking at the 7th Asian Regional Conservative Forum of the International Union for Conservation of Nature in Islamabad. The Prime Minister said Pakistan has 12 ecological zones ranging from deserts to Himalayan forests, which is rare. But he added that population growth and a lack of interest in protecting the environment in the past has devastated Pakistan's wildlife and forests. Prime Minister Imran Khan said the government has now embarked upon an ambitious plan to planting 10 billion trees. He said young Pakistanis will have to play their role to protect the environment.
What we hope is to create enough awareness amongst the young people. The big advantage, if we can convert this into advantage, is our young population. 60% of Pakistanis are below the age of 30. And we find that young people, when you inspire them, and actually all over the world, the young people will eventually drive this movement to protect the environment.
The Prime Minister said the government has also started another campaign to control urbanization by constructing taller buildings in the cities. The Prime Minister also regretted the US's decision to pull out of the Paris Accord. Moving on, Kashmiris on both sides of line of control and around the world observed the Jammu Martyrs' Day. In November 1947, Indian forces massacred thousands of Kashmiris in occupied Jammu while they were migrating to Pakistan. Azad Kashmir Prime Minister Farooq Haider Khan said the first week of November 1947 was the bleakest chapter of the Kashmir liberation struggle. Speaking on the BJP government's atrocities in the valley, Azad Kashmir President Sardar Masood Khan said Indian atrocities of this day gave a new spark to Kashmir's struggle. A number of rallies, conferences and seminars on the incident will be held in Kashmir and other parts of the world. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned with Indus. Welcome back. In Hong Kong, Chief Executive Carrie Lam says ongoing protests are impacting the freedom of the region's general public. She was speaking to reporters in Beijing after a pro-China politician was stabbed in Hong Kong. Lam condemned the stabbing and said any violent action should not be tolerated by any civilized society. She said the chaotic situation in Hong Kong posed challenges to the newly considered legislation on national security. Earlier, China's Vice Prime Minister Han Zhang said Beijing will establish a legal system to safeguard national security in Hong Kong. He said the anti-government protests are damaging the one country, two systems formula, under which the former British colony has been governed since its handover to China in 1997. Hong Kong has been rocked by protests since June when the government introduced a controversial extradition bill. Though the bill has been withdrawn, anger is still simmering among the locals. In Turkey, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Turkish forces have captured the wife of slain ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The arrest was reportedly made from the area of Aleppo province, which is now under Turkey's control. Speaking to students in Ankara, Erdogan said Turkey has also captured Baghdadi's sister and brother-in-law. The president said Turkey does not want to make a fuss about it, unlike the US did after Baghdadi's death. Last month, the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has claimed killing two of Baghdadi's wives in a raid. In Jordan, 8 people, including 4 foreign tourists, have been stabbed in the northern city of Jerash. Police have arrested a suspected attacker from a nearby tourist place. Jordanian authorities said the victims included tourists from Mexico and Switzerland. They said a local tour guide and a security guard were also among those wounded. Viewed as a safe destination, Jordan heavily depends on its tourism industry. Iraq's security forces have opened fire to disperse protesters gathered on a bridge in central Baghdad, shooting live bullets in the air. Forces have shot dead at least 13 protesters over the past 24 hours. Thousands continue to partake in anti-government demonstrations in the capital and southern provinces. Protesters have blocked the Shuhada Bridge since Tuesday afternoon as part of the efforts to bring the country to a standstill. They also blocked the entrance to the Nasiriyah oil refinery in southern Iraq. The protesters blocked the tankers that transport fuel to gas stations from entering the refinery, causing fuel shortages across the Dahikar province. Meanwhile, the US has condemned the killing and kidnapping of unarmed demonstrators. In a statement, the US Embassy in Baghdad asked the government to engage with the protesters. 17 people have been killed in an overnight gun battle at an outpost on the Tajik-Uzbek border. Tajikistan's National Security Committee says a border guard also died in the attack. The committee said border police shot dead 15 attackers in retaliatory fire. It said the remaining 5 attackers have been captured by the security forces. Suspected insurgents have killed 15 and wounded 4 village defense volunteers in Thailand's southern Yala province. The Thai army says the militants struck 2 checkpoints in Yala province manned by civil defense volunteers. It said the attackers used explosives and scattered nails on the roads to hamper attempts to follow them. South Thailand has been in the grip of bloody insurgency, killing over 7,000 people in the last 15 years. The rebels want autonomy from Thailand for a region bordering Malaysia. Lufthansa says it's scrapping 1,300 flights as the German cabin crew pressed ahead with a 2-day strike over poor working conditions. Around 180,000 passengers will be affected by the flight cancellations. The 48-hour stoppage, called by the UFO Flight Attendants Union, is due to start tonight and last until Friday. The union said the stoppage would affect all Lufthansa departures in Germany during that time. Germany's largest airline said it regrets the inconvenience for the passengers. The carrier is putting together an alternative flight schedule wherever possible. The airline said affected passengers could rebook their journeys for free or swap their domestic flights for train tickets. The announcement was made regarding the cancellation of 700 flights on Thursday and roughly 600 on Friday. This comes after a Frankfurt labor court denied Lufthansa's request for an injunction to block the strike. The court ruled that the strike was legal. Extinction Rebellion has won a legal challenge in London's High Court against a police ban on protests during its autumn uprising. The court declared the police ban was unlawful. It ruled separate gatherings, even if coordinated by one organization, couldn't be defined as a single public assembly. Earlier, police arrested dozens of Extinction Rebellion members for defying the ban. The group targeted major companies, government departments, and transport network during its action. Extinction Rebellion is campaigning to make the climate crisis the world's foremost policy issue. A group of over 11,000 scientists from around the world have warned the planet is facing a climate emergency. They launched a study based on 40 years of data taken from a range of measures. The group says governments are failing to address the crisis. The statement is published in the journal Bioscience on the 40th anniversary of the first World Climate Conference. They say the climate crisis is more severe than expected and threatens ecosystems and the fate of humanity. The statement by the scientists from 153 countries set out vital signs as indicators of the climate emergency. The scientists say major transformations must be made in the way global society functions and interacts with the natural ecosystems. In Indian capital New Delhi, the residents and environmental groups have staged a protest to press for action on acute air pollution. Despite the air quality in the capital improved slightly, the city still chokes under a thick blanket of smog. More in this report.
Wearing anti-pollution masks, Delhiites of all ages gathered at India Gate to demand their right for clean air. Over the last few days, New Delhi's air quality reached apocalyptic levels. With thick smog in the air, the city has practically converted to a gas chamber.
My eyes are itching and there's some problem in breathing as well. When I step outside, it feels like there's a lot of pollution. So because of that, I'm wearing a mask as well.
The air remains at the hazardous level, more than 5 times the recommended safe limit of 60 particulate matter. Such pollution reading indicates a serious aggravation of heart and lung diseases in the teeming capital of more than 20 million people. The residents criticize authorities for their failure to curb pollution.
We do not care whether it's central government's responsibility or the state government's responsibility. It's a collective failure, it's a collective responsibility, and they all need to solve it ASAP.
Every winter, Delhi is wrapped in a noxious blend of smog from car fumes and industrial emissions and burning fields. These make Delhi one of the world's most polluted cities.
Climate change is affecting the natural life cycles of Argentina, leaving animal breeders and farmers grappling with a crippling drought. Latin American countries among the most vulnerable to the global warming. This report has more. Global warming is predicted to have significant effects on the climate of Argentina. Animal breeders are already being forced to adapt to changes in the environment. A scarcity of snowfall and other forms of precipitation lowers the flow of water. According to reports, the country's water flow has fallen by 54% compared to the regional average. This is an alarming situation. Meanwhile, goat breeders compete for water and struggle to cope with the situation.
No, now it is the issue of drought. It doesn't snow, there is no water, all the watersheds are drying up, and because the animals don't get fat, they don't produce milk for the kids. The countryside isn't doing well.
A local breeder says they depend on sheep, goat and horse breeding to survive. Hence, authorities should take tangible measures to tackle the situation. He also believes breeders themselves also need to make an effort.
We must do our job. What else are we going to live off? We only live off the animals. We must make a huge effort, and there are sacrifices that must be made. But we have to face everything that comes.
Global warming is also affecting Argentina's glaciers, which are shrinking as temperatures rise and precipitation levels fall. Well, exercise can boost the world economy by as much as $100 billion a year. Really, this claim appears in a study by health insurance group Vitality and the think tank around Europe. The study was based in part on data from about 120 people across 7 countries. It found adding 15 minutes of daily walking or jogging, a steady 1 kilometer each day, would improve productivity. This in turn extends life expectancy and leads to economic growth. Round Europe says the study gives policymakers and employers new perspectives on enhancing the productivity of their populations. The WHO recommends all adults should take at least 150 minutes of moderate exercise or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise in a week. It has been 28 years since the end of the Cold War, but its effects continue to have an impact on the world today. This is especially true for Central Asia, where the USSR's uranium mining could leave the water supply of millions contaminated. More in this report.
The Fergana Valley is spread across Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan and is home to 14 million people. Thanks to the two rivers named Narin and Kara Darya, it is one of the region's most fertile areas. Now these tributaries are threatened by nuclear waste left behind by the Soviet Union.
I have examined it myself. There are places there with background radiation of over 100 micro-Röntgen per hour. Recently, 2 or 3 years ago, they have built 2-3 houses there in such a poisoned place.
There has been no mining operations in this area since 1968, but the Soviet Union did produce over 2 million cubic meters of tailings or mine dumps while exploiting the valley's natural resources. Should a natural disaster like an earthquake or landslide occur, all of this waste will end up in the water the area's people depend on to survive.
Most uranium tailings repositories are located in transboundary areas. 14 million people live in the Fergana Valley. In the event of a natural disaster, water can erode the tailings. They will fall into the Narin River. It will be a tragedy for the whole valley.
This is a worst-case scenario that has not come to pass yet. But people's health is already suffering, and environmentalists say farms downstream from the rivers are already poisoned.
The majority of the adult population suffer from diseases of the digestive system, blood, and vascular glands. It is 4 times as high as the average in the Republic of Kyrgyzstan. It shows ecological situation is in critical condition.
It has been estimated properly removing this waste and solving the problem once and for all will cost over $33 million. Until this happens, the people of this area will continue to suffer from higher rates of cancer, thyroid disease, and Down syndrome.
A South Korean service is offering free funerals, but only to the living. The company hopes to improve people's lives by simulating their deaths. This report has the details.
Dozens of people, from teenagers to the retired, are seen putting on shrouds and feigning death at the Hyowon Healing Center in central Seoul. They took funeral portraits, wrote their last testaments, and rested in a closed coffin for about 10 minutes. A 28-year-old Choi Jin-kyu was one of them. Wiping tears, he said this time in the coffin helped him decide on a new approach to life.
Everyone lives in a hot-blooded, intense manner. When I was in the coffin, I wondered what the point of that is. I want people to know that they matter and that happiness is in the present.
The WHO says South Korea's suicide rate of 20 per 100,000 residents is almost double the global average. More than 25,000 people have taken part in mass living funerals since 2012. The head of the healing center, Jeong Yong-mun, says he has helped people appreciate their lives and find reconciliation with family and friends.
I think this is important. We apologize sooner because we don't have forever. Some people come when they have decided to commit suicide. I help to reverse their decision. Later, they call me to thank.
A 75-year-old person taking part suggests preparing for death was necessary for them to have a good life.
More stories to follow, but right after a short break, stay tuned with Indus. The The oil field auction comes a week after beaches in northeastern Brazil were struck by a mysterious oil slick. Now moving on, stock markets across Europe are trading flat as investors await further developments in trade talks between the US and China. Investors in Britain, France and Germany are largely focused on third quarter corporate earnings. The CAC 40 in Paris has gained a fraction despite a 34% drop in profits by leading bank Société Générale. Frankfurt's DAX index is also marginally higher after sportswear manufacturer Adidas reported a 6% year-on-year increase in sales. London's FTSE 100 index is unchanged. In Asia, the Shanghai Composite closed nearly 0.5% lower. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 index gained about 0.25%. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.